Carol for being host.
Okay, it is 6 o'clock, so I will call the meeting to order. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alicia, could you please do a roll call? Yep.
Lori Blargen.
Here.
Ian McDonald.
Here.
Matt Buchwald.
Here.
Lacey Astor.
Here.
Bruce Blargen.
Here.
Sheree Link.
Here.
Marge Blow.
Our district mission: together we engage, educate, and empower all learners, bridging their passions to pathways to create successful futures and positively contribute to our local and global communities. Is there a motion to approve our agenda tonight?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Should we amend it?
We wouldn't have to amend it. I'm going to add a second piece to it. Is there
I'll
a
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. With our public comment tonight, per our policy, it states that the portion of the meeting during which the comment of the public is invited shall be limited to 20 minutes. According to my list of people, I have more than 20 minutes, but we can extend that if it is approved by extended vote of the board to go over that 20 minutes. Is there a motion to do that?
I'll make a motion to extend public comment greater than 20 minutes in order to accommodate anyone that wants to speak.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We'll do a roll call vote. Lori?
With misgivings, yes.
Ian?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Bruce?
Yes.
Sheree?
Yes.
Motion carries. Okay, then moving on to public comment, we will honor all of the public comment that are here. Opinions and ideas contributed by students, parents, staff, and other citizens are valuable to the school board. The board will receive such input without comment or take no action relative to any items brought forth. They may direct the district administrator to consider such an item at an appropriate place on the agenda or a subsequent meeting. The board has set aside 20 minutes. We now have extended that. Anyone attending the meeting in person wishing to address the board is asked to fill out a card, which I also have. Please limit comments to 3 minutes. Also, just with some of our past comments going through the policy as some reminders, participants, please recognize your announcement of your name and address and group affiliation if appropriate. Also, the presiding officer may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement when the statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, obscene, or irrelevant. So, we will start with Kate Jessica.
There's two over there.
Yeah. All right.
I'll give you about a 20-second heads up as you're getting close.
Okay, my boys asked me to come do this today, so here we go. You ready? I am well aware of the fact that some books are not a good fit for every child and every family, but Somerset High School is a public school. The books in our library are meant to entertain and educate all kinds of families. Some books in the library contain ideas that are outside of Christian teachings, but we are not a Christian school. Our community is filled with people of varying belief systems, and parents here have vastly different approaches to raising their children. In Somerset, we have students with 2 moms, 2 dads, single parents, and families like mine who have both a mom and a dad. This is what public schools look like all over our country. As parents, we teach our kids what we feel will give them the best foundation. Parents that believe that homosexuality is wrong is within their rights to keep their child from reading books with that kind of content. Parents that think that sexual language should be used only in a marriage or by adults have every right to exclude their children from reading these books. The problem here is that other parents are choosing what's right for our children. By restricting these books, the school would be allowing one side of this argument to dictate what's best for the entire district. I suggest that the families looking to keep their children from certain topics need to contact the school and flag material that their children are not allowed to read. Where private schools are built to steer students away from ideas outside of their belief systems, the same is not true for public schools. Families should have access to books that reflect the diversity of students in our district. I personally want my high schooler to read books that have gay characters in my home because homosexuality is not a negative for me. I want them to have access to books about their changing bodies and books that normalize sexuality. I encourage my children to find common ground with people that are different from us. My intent is to teach my children empathy and respect for viewpoints that differ from our own. You may completely disagree with my parental approach, and I respect your right to raise your children the way that suits your family best, but it sets a dangerous precedent to remove books from the library that aren't required reading. A book about a rape is certainly a difficult topic, but it's an important one, because every 68 seconds another American is sexually assaulted. A book that chronicles a victim's assault and her attempts to get her perpetrator behind bars is not pornography. While the language may be graphic, its purpose is not to arouse the reader. Sadly, statistics show that some of our students will or have experienced a sexual assault. This book may be exactly what that child needs to feel understood, regain their power, or at the very least, feel less alone. I respectfully urge you to choose what's best for your individual children, and I will choose what's right for mine.
Ruth, quick question.
Yeah.
Officer Kerber's on a little bit of a tight timeline. Is it too late to potentially amend the agenda?
We better let him do
You don't
it.
want to sit through all this?
Didn't even cross my mind.
Just
I
think
should have,
goodbye, but
wasn't even thinking about it.
I didn't know. If it's not possible, I didn't know.
Is there a motion to amend and we can go back?
If we can amend, I would be happy to make that motion.
what are we amending to?
What are we amending? He has to go,
Oh.
so let him speak and then we can go back.
Oh.
Okay.
Is there a motion from the board to amend our agenda for the order so Officer Kerber could go and then we would go back to public comment?
So moved.
Is there a second? In favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. We'll go to you, Officer Kerber, and then we'll go back to our public comment.
Right, so apologies to disrupt that. I just came from coaching the C team, so baseball team, so I apologize if people say next to me if I smell.
You know.
My name's Jared Kerber, I'm our school resource officer here for the district. Thank you for allowing me to be here. This year has flown by for me. I spoke at the last board meeting I was invited to. I think it was around January 10th. So I handed out calls for service sheets where I documented each time that I was asked to interact with a student. So I put on that sheet at the middle school, the elementary school, and high school, all my different calls, what they were. So I'll just touch on a few things that I've been a part of additionally to that. I have been a part of ALICE trainings at the high school. That is alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. I'm supposed to be going to a training in June, which would enable me to be an instructor and then teach alongside the teachers at all the different schools. I was able to teach a middle school health class, CPR, and the importance of that. They asked me to come in and, make sure students know that it's a serious topic. Sometimes when we're pushing on inflatable tubes, essentially, they don't take it seriously. So I shared my experiences, and I think that went really well. Tomorrow I'm going to be part of mock interviews at the middle school. I've done that, I think, 3 times. This will be the 3rd time this year. So it gives the student an opportunity to go in front of a uniformed individual. I think they're most scared of me when I sit down in front of them. So the biggest connection that I've been able to have with students is me coaching the C team. That's just had a tremendous impact on my relationship with them. Before I began coaching, I would walk through, and I think high schoolers are sort of at that age where do they like the police? Do they not like the police? And this is been a 180 for me. I'll have students yell at me in the hallways when they see me. I just attended the Cedar Lake Speedway races last night, and there were some kids that I coached that saw me and were ecstatic to see me. So it's really helped build a good relationship with students at the high school specifically. I like to go through the elementary school and middle school as well. I try to give kids high fives, and I have these little badge stickers that I give out sometimes. I actually went to I don't know if you guys are familiar, but the Mongolian barbecue in Stillwater, and a student had seen me from the elementary school there, and they came up to me the next day, they're like, "Hey, were you at the buffet?" And I was like, "Yeah, that was me." Yeah. So I know you guys can't see this, but right in the stands here. But from the beginning of the school year to January 10th, there was a total of 61 incidents that I specifically handled. I didn't document all the times that I interacted with kids or, talked to them in hallways. These are actual calls that I was requested by either my dispatch or a staff member to speak to a student. So there were 61 from the beginning of the year to January 10th, and then from January 10th to now, there was 64. At the elementary school, there was a total of 14, middle school 18, and high school 32. So at the elementary school, there was numerous juvenile complaints, and that's a big, it encompasses a lot of different things. So like a student who is misbehaving, runaway juvenile or student, there was 4 of those. So there's traffic complaints, extra patrol requests, public assists. That would be an example of like unlocking someone's vehicle who locked their keys in their car. And 3 911 hang-ups. At the middle school, again, there was 18 total, 3 disorderly conduct incidents, and for you guys to know the definition of that, it's anyone in a public or private setting that engages in violent, boisterous, profane, indecent, loud, or otherwise disorderly conduct. So that's just, again, a student misbehaving. 2 traffic complaints, 1 damage to property, 4 911 hang-ups, 2 suspicious activities. At the high school, 32 total, 1 public assist, vehicle unlock, 2 alarms, 1 parking complaint, 3 accidents, 1 911 hang-up, 8 truancy violations, 5 disorderly conduct disturbances, 4 harassments, 2 sexual assaults, 2 threat complaints, 2 controlled substance complaints, and 1 emergency detention, so mental health, where someone is experiencing a mental health crisis, and we then intervene there. So, I guess that's all I have. If anyone has any questions, open it up to that.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you for presenting.
I'm going to take off, so.
Thank you. Okay, we will move back to public comment, and Ruth, you are next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ruth Harleen. I live at 1955 County Road C in Somerset, Wisconsin with my partner Carol and our 21-year-old son, Ben. I'm here today because I'd like to discuss the effort to ban books within our high school. First of all, I'd like to say to everybody here that I really do commiserate. I know at the end of the day, all we want to do is protect our children from a violent world. So I commiserate with everyone in this room. School shootings, drug overdoses, suicides, these occur daily in school districts across America. I found it just horrifying when we had to start having active shooter drills within our school. But at the end of the day, what are our alternatives? When we limit our children's access to information, we're not protecting them. We are leaving them way more vulnerable to the ills of society. The greatest gift we can offer our children is help them to develop critical thinking skills to navigate the world. Literature is just one place of many that can insert our kids into storylines that give them personal references for how to navigate these topics. Knowledge and relatability are empowering. One of the books that's top on the list that everyone's reviewing right now is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. It's basically a coming-of-age story about Charlie, a 15-year-old boy starting high school. He's socially awkward. Is there profanity in it? Yes, there is. Is there sexual assault in it? Yes, there is. Drug and alcohol use? Yes. But really, from my point of view, it probably is far less exposure to these topics than what our kids see on TV, including news and social media, and are walking around our community every day. I'd like to read one portion of it because I feel like it's been cherry-picked to hell in terms of what people have chosen to pull out of this book. This is the end of the story where Charlie has survived his years in high school, and he's looking back on his experiences, and I found it especially poignant. Understand, friend, there are millions of us, millions of people who struggle with and overcome all sorts of problems. You would be shocked to know how many people understand exactly what you are going through. So if these words make sense, if you have known these stories yourself, if you've experienced or witnessed abuse, physical, sexual, emotional, if you have struggled with mental illness of any kind or love someone who does, if you are surrounded by those who call you what you are different instead of beautiful, if your mind or body has cried out for peace, acknowledgement, and understanding, just know you are part of an infinite family. People who have been through terrible things and survived them.
20 seconds.
Okay, if you are reading these words, you won today. You are here. You are alive. You have options. To me, I want my kid to read this book. I want all of our kids to read this book because I think it has beautiful, wonderful messages for us. But I get it, that it's your right to not allow it for your family. Put it on the list of the media center books that you don't want your kid to read. Put the other books that you find offensive on there. You guys have options if you don't want your kids to read this stuff. But do not presume to make that decision for the rest of us. It saddens me that our community has become so divided. Let's do better for our community and for our kids. Thank you.
Allison?
Allison Carrico, 1730 under 12th Street. I'm here about the book review. I would first like to wish a special happy belated Mother's Day to all the mothers here. I think we can all agree what a true blessing it is to be a mother. And I'm here tonight again as a concerned mother, concerned about sexually explicit material in my child's school. A concern I never thought would cross my mind. And you say it's in our world everywhere. Can't they have a break in school? I mean, but here we are, concerned about the fact that almost 100 days have gone by and only one of the books on the initial 33 has been reviewed, when the average adult can read a book 200 to 300 pages in a few hours. Concerned that book not only passed the committee's review and was put back on the high school library shelf, but now the remaining 27 books have also been returned to my child's library shelf. And my only option is to put my kid on a list and trust that Brandon Barry will do his best to ensure that my child does not check out library books about rape, incest, pedophilia, human trafficking in a school. I quote, "The committee believes that the overall literary merit of this book as a whole outweighs the concerns brought forward by the initial book challenge letter. The Perks of Being a Wallflower is a coming-of-age, high-interest novel." Pause quote for a second. High interest, yet this book was only checked out once in the last 4 years, and we're pretty sure it's by our group. Back to quote. High-interest novel, which exhibits, number 1, strong character development. Number 2, supportive, encouraging role models. Pause quote again. As you're listening to these 7 bullet points, please recall the excerpts we've read in the past in the entire rape scene. Not very encouraging role models, I'd say. Back to quote. Number 3, a multitude of real life relevant experiences that teenagers encounter frequently. Pause quote again, like doing it doggy style with a sandwich bag. Back to quote number 4, the importance of participating and being present in life. What does that even mean? Number 5, inclusion and acceptance of all types of people and choices. That was never about this. Number 4, healing generational and personal trauma. If any of you even know anything about generational trauma, you would not say anything about that. Number 7, mental health awareness. End quote. And with that, I'm going to switch over to a few questions of a dear friend of mine who could not make it tonight. She wonders if they made these books into a movie, what would they be rated? And would you bring your child, your underage child, to see it? As some of you know, The Perks of Being a Wallflower is indeed a movie. What some of you may not know is the film was originally received an R rating for teen, drug and alcohol use, and some sexual references. The filmmaker appealed the decision, and the MPAA changed it to PG-13. Clearly, appeals work. God bless you all.
Thanks, Al.
Amanda?
Amanda Hine, 1907 Riverview Lane, Somerset. I have friends that are on both sides of this issue tonight, so bear with me if I get emotional regardless. So our family chose Somerset School District when my son was 3 years old. It was around the same time of his diagnosis of autism. And having special needs and a nonverbal child, it was already challenging. So we interviewed all of the surrounding school districts, walked the halls, spoke to the teachers, did our research, and we came to Somerset School District because they were the best. And we've had amazing relationships with teachers, support staff, therapists over the years. And my son is thriving today because of this school district. So at the beginning of last year, we made the hard decision to pull my son out of the school district. And not one person asked us why. Not one person approached us because we had decided that the school district for our requests could no longer meet our needs. No, we have a special education student who maybe my feelings were different than that, but there wasn't any interaction there. So right now, we're open enrolled in another school district, but as I've talked to Shannon, like we are possibly considering coming back to the school district. So I am a community member. I own 3 businesses in town. I follow everything that's going on. I watch all of the board meetings, and I have since my son began in the school district. And so my son, with his autism, he loves war to an extreme extent, and the library is his home. It's where he finds his comfort. He reads about war, he reads about history and stuff. And it takes a lot of work for us to decide and have to pre-vet the things that he can read because they're not all appropriate. I mean, with war comes rape, it comes tragedy in the worst ways. And so I don't feel it's appropriate for him to read everything. He is freshly 16 and he's a vulnerable young adult, so I don't think that it's appropriate. But I am personally concerned for the ability to have context within our library that explicitly has sexual assault in it, that has rape in it, that has these other things in it. As a survivor of rape, I don't understand the value, and this is me personally, I don't understand the value of a book that talks about rape, that exposes them to it more. We only get this little bit of time of innocence, and so to me, personally, as a mom, I already have to do that work. And so I always had the expectation, I sent my son to school with him not being exposed to those things. And we go to the public library for the things that he can't get here at the school district. That is what we do as a parent. But I would hope that here he would be safe from that. So that's all I have to say. Thank you all.
Erica?
Hello. Thank you to the school board for letting us speak tonight. I'd like to commend you and the committee that chose the book, to keep the book in the library. It is essential in a strong democracy that people are exposed to different viewpoints and experiences. By exposing you to a myriad of beliefs, backgrounds, struggles, this leads to empathy for others, understanding, and giving people grace in their daily lives. By learning about others, this helps us understand the many voices in our society that might have vastly disparate life experiences or stories. By acknowledging that these differences strengthen a community, they don't undermine our foundations, but instead bolster them. Having books with characters who show varied life events and journeys is one way for someone to learn about others and the reality of some people's lives. By reading about harsh realities of these experiences, it provides a safe space within the pages of a book to learn and confront harsh realities of some people's existence. I'd rather my child learn about brutality, cruelty, and inhumanity in the second person than in the first person in their own story. So having a child read is also a conduit for discussion, to talk through the circumstance and the resolution of a plot. You can talk about which life lessons they can be gleaned from that story. All these things help a person learn about the world around them and make them a better citizen. By banning books, you're removing the ability for parents to make a choice for their children. There is a way for parents to limit their access to books that they deem inappropriate, but they want to take that choice away from other parents and remove all access for books they don't agree with. The Supreme Court case, Board of Education, Island Trees Union Free School District versus PICO, the Supreme Court Justice William Brennan Jr. issued an opinion asserting that under the First Amendment, local school boards may not remove books from library shelves simply because they dislike the ideas contained in these books. School children do not remove their First Amendment right when they walk through a school door. So I encourage the school board to be guardians of free speech and continue to be. Thank you.
Patty?
Which one?
Patty Forsberg. I was taking my sixth then.
Katie Forsberg, 350 Paquin Drive, Somerset. A small group of parents is pushing to ban books they find personally offensive. They claim it is about parental choice and protecting children, but they have a choice with our current policy. That is not enough for them. Wisconsin statutory definitions of obscenity and materials that are harmful to children is established in law, and it uses the phrase taken as a whole 9 times. It does not state obscene 2-page descriptions of events. It states taken as a whole. The educators in Somerset teach the importance of both literature and civics. For me, those teachers, specifically Mr. Walker, Mrs. Murphy, Mrs. Oberstar, Mr. Barno, and Mr. Potter, impacted us in so many ways. We learned about the beauty of literature, law, discourse, and freedom. It is obviously, though, that not all the students retain these lessons. Several board members do not respect the nonpartisan nature of their role. They have openly assured the community that they will use their conservative political ideologies to make decisions. Any board member making decisions on these materials prior to reviewing the entire work are acting irresponsibly and illegally. It is literally illegal for you as a board member to use your evaluation for the censorship purposes against materials having serious literary or education value. The committee reviewing these books are qualified, trustworthy, and professional in assessing books and serious literary or educational value. They are also experts in evaluating appropriate literature and curriculum for students. They're experts. The board should lean on the experts for guidance to fully evaluate these items. The parents openly attacking teachers, administrators, and community members are embarrassing. Some of these parents are complete hypocrites, as when I was a teen with them, we were partaking in deviant behaviors. Members are also continuously referring to those who openly disagree with us as groomers and pedophiles. And they're using those words against the administrators, against school employees, and others. This is against Wisconsin laws for defamation and harassment. The language used is to insult and intimidate us, and it does not hold any purpose. We should not be scared in our community, yet they are making us fear for our safety. I am monitoring all defamation and harassment communication on social media via screenshots that are being sent to me, and will file harassment restraining orders and push for criminal charges if this harassment doesn't stop. This is accountability, and words matter. That said, it is the board's responsibility to follow the laws and policies established and codified as such. Are you going to do the job you sworn to do? Are you going to uphold policy 0144.5J and render all decisions based on the available facts and independent judgment and refuse to surrender that judgment to individuals or special interest groups? Or are you just going to be a pawn for Moms for Liberty? Are you going to continue to waste taxpayer dollars pandering to these people who do not care about our dire district's financial situation? We'll soon find out. With or without you, will continue to fight for the rights of students and their access to literature deemed appropriate by the experts in our district. We do not have to be as loud as those, but we are the majority.
Jolie?
Good afternoon, good evening, sorry, I'm a little behind. Jolene Degalow, proud vice chair of our newly formed Moms for Liberty, St. Croix County represent. I'm a district mom and-
Can you state your address too, please?
Oh, sure, 196th Avenue in Somerset. Thank you all for your thankless work. I know often no one knows the amount of time and effort you put into all that you do for our community, and we thank you for that. And as you know, as parents, we are the ultimate authority on our children's developing moral character and value systems. This discussion is not about the literary merit of certain authors, rather the common sense discussion of what is age-appropriate content for minors. Once the district takes this decision away from parents and then the board, we have indeed entered into a top-down tyrannical mentality that suggests only those in authority have a say in things that matter. This is not how our country was founded. Americans have traditionally agreed as a society on the idea of appropriateness, on age appropriateness. This should not take a degree in education or expert status to determine. The school uses internet filters so that students cannot access pornography and other inappropriate content on the internet. Where is the outrage for the internet banning that is going on with these censoring on the internet websites at school? How many sites have been censored for our children? And is there a large list of the 2022 websites that have been censored for our children? Of course there's not, because this is common sense. No one is calling for book banning. We're asking for age-appropriate material only be included in our children's library. This is not about religious beliefs. This is about pornographic material. Diversity does not equal pornography. That's insulting to the groups that you stand behind. Is it funny? I know it is, it's hilarious.
It is.
You're equating yourself to that.
It's funny to have pedophilia.
Dr. Donnelly, just like the internet, books are curated to not allow our minor children to access pornographic language, pictures, and cartoons when they are in school, which is supposed to be a safe place of learning. Dr. Donnelly has added options for students that they can contact Mr. Berry if they wish their child not to have access to these books. Quote, "We can note your preference in our system, and our staff will put forth its best effort to prevent the students from being able to check out these titles." What does best effort mean?
20 seconds.
What does this look like? The option is not even included in policy 2522. Therefore, it is difficult to trust how this will be implemented and effective. Further, what happens when our children turn 16? Your policy states we don't even have access to what they're checking out. So what recourse do we have? We can't even see what they're checking out, yet we're supposed to be able to put your name on a list for 16 to 18-year-olds. Thank you.
DJ?
I'm DJ Brinkman, 416 Abbey Lane, Somerset. Kind of on a whim here, just didn't write anything down. just curious why we went from a few months to going through the books to now years going to process all this. I'm not waiting years for this to be processed, and I thought you would have a little bit of a moral standard to at least keep the books off until you made some kind of readings on them. I'm just flabbergasted that this is even a thing, that we're following policies that may not even be what the majority or the right thing to do is. Why can't policy change? I mean, some of these books have bestiality in there. Do we know what that is? Having sex with animals, this is okay too.
DJ, can you make sure that your comment isn't personally directed? Because
Sure.
One individual, thank you.
Yeah. So I'll just read a little thing off of our own school student handbook about harassment. Sexual harassment may include, but is not limited to, the following: unsolicited verbal sexual comments and harassment, subtle pressure for sexual activity, sexist remarks spoken or written about a person's body or sexual deviation, patting, pinching, or unnecessary touching, sexually oriented jokes, stories, and materials. Isn't that what we're arguing about? Is the materials in our school?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what we're talking about. Demanding sexual favors accompanied by implied or over threats concerning or employment, academic. But I think rape would maybe be demanding sexual favors and things of that nature. Also in the handbook, they have using a filtering system to block sites deemed unnecessary and or inappropriate, offensive, disruptive, or harmful. Data include but not limited to any messages, files, or data which contain the following: pornographic or erotic images, which I've heard some of these books have these in there. Pictures as well, is not as all the other graphic content. Pornographic or erotic images, sexual implications, I think we're beyond that point. Racial slurs, derogatory gender-specific comments, which this has nothing to do about anybody's sexual orientation. Any comment in any way defames, slanders, or libels another person.
3 minutes, DJ.
All right. Well, I think you get my point. Okay.
Thank you. Just as a reminder before going forward, there's no commentary that would distract the board or members of the audience when people are having their 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lacey.
Grant.
Grant Lind, 2133 62nd Street, Somerset. I'm very troubled by the requirement to opt out. One of the things that I deal with is firearms. I'm a professional firearms trainer. I train people in concealed carry. I train people in personal self-defense. And one of the things that's come up with this is that there are certain states that changed the rules, and they said every place is a sensitive place. And by calling every place a sensitive place, the only way that you may carry a firearm in those locations is if they post a sign that says firearms are welcome, which is a direct violation of the Constitution. And all of those states are going through legal trouble, legal battles, and having that turned around. My right under the Second Amendment is to carry a firearm. My right is to carry it wherever I deem it appropriate, unless someone requires or asks that I do not. The book system that we have here is I have to know the books that I don't want my students to be able to read, my children to be able to read. And then I have to go and make a request that my student be placed on that list, as opposed to having a general where the students may opt in to what books they may read. If parents want their children to read certain books, those parents can choose to put that on an in list that those students may check out. I don't have time to read every book in this library. And I've read thousands of books, thousands, tens of thousands. But I don't have time to read them all. So I have to assume that the library has age-appropriate material that falls within the criteria of the law for students to be able to have access to them. But if I want my students to be able to read something else, then I need to request that they be able to read that. And most often when that happens, my children need to go to the public library to check that material out, because it's public. Thank you.
Kristen? Cisco?
Back again. So a little different than the topic we've been talking about. It does have to, it ties into what everybody is concerned about tonight, but I am making a plea. Our teachers are professionals. They're leaving, they're flooding out of the profession left and right. You guys are showing why. This is so hard. I didn't even think this would be that hard. I apologize. I never wanted to do anything but be a teacher. I love my profession. I miss it dearly. But this stuff, my heart is racing right now. We have to stop. Teachers are professionals. I have 4 degrees. You put your children in my hands 8 hours a day, trusting that I would do my job, and I did. I got nominated for things, didn't want that, didn't need any of that. I miss the kids so badly. This is wrecking our town. We are not gonna have good teachers. They're not gonna stay. They can't. I had to leave for mental health. I couldn't take it anymore. It's not different anywhere else except that Somerset is so isolated. How do you get good teachers? How do you keep them? This is not what they should be doing on a daily basis. Please stop. Just quit.
Patty? Shockman?
Patty Schottner, 1064 210th Avenue, Somerset. I'm a second generation of 4 generations of Somerset students. My parents went here, my husband and I both graduated here, our kids all graduated here, our first grandchild graduated here, and we have 9 grandchildren in the district. One could say that this district is a major financial investment for our family. This community, we've invested a lot of our hard-earned money into this school district to make sure that our children are educated and well-rounded into what's going on in the world. Some of the greatest teachers have taught us the importance of literature and its impact. I'm so disappointed that we're going through this thing on book banning. The first book I ever read out of a Somerset school library was Oliver Twist. It's a classic. It's a classic, and they have violence. There's sex, prostitution, there's poverty, there's everything in there. But the book is a book that me and my mom and dad and my brothers and sisters, we talked about at the dinner table. because it was nothing I knew about. The whole world of Oliver Twist was not anything I knew about it, but I read about it. I have higher expectations, not only for my community, but for my board to even think about banning books, any book. If you don't want your kids to read books, then don't let your kids read those books. But there are lots of things out there and lots of experiences that happen in this world. I worked at this school district for 7 years. I worked in the health office. During that time, students came to me when they were assaulted. They came to me as their parents were going through divorces. They came to me talking about how do they go to their parents to talk about being gay or transgender or whatever was going on in their life. They talked to me about the domestic violence that was happening in their homes. Kids trust teachers. They trust their guidance counselors. They trust their administrators. They trust the health professionals. And sometimes that line is the first line before they come home and talk to their parents. And it's okay. We were all teenagers at one time. There were things that we did when we were kids that you would tell a trusted adult that maybe you didn't tell your parents. Every one of us in this room can say that exact same thing. And I think one of the biggest things that I learned when I worked here at this school district was the sex trafficking that was going on. And it happened here. And we took care of it here. Us staff took care of it. We knew what to do and how to handle it. And we advocated for children. Children in this school district, in this community, parents are going to leave because they don't feel safe and protected. And having that front line of our teachers and administrators is very important. So please, please think about that when you make that decision. And I have some handouts on teens and pornography that you might find interesting.
Leslie?
Good evening. I'm not supposed to look at anybody, is that correct, Ms. Lacy?
What was that?
I'm not supposed to look at anybody?
Yeah, don't look at Shannon at least.
Don't look at Shannon.
Don't look at Shannon.
Okay, see, when I went to school.
Just don't be directed, that's all.
I was taught that good communication skills, including watching body language and good eye contact. Okay, so I'll try to forget what I learned, okay?
Don't direct anybody, sir. That's all they're saying.
Can I look at their feet?
You can look at everybody.
Thank you.
You can look at all of us. I was looking at an actor personally.
Excuse me?
It's just not personally directed.
My name is Leslie Pankenine, 1929 Seacard Lane. I'm sure many of you know where I live because you put a sign up in my yard, which I have requested. Somerset, sorry. My mom, she used to watch Rachel Ray. And after the program was over, she would say, that looks good, I think I'm gonna try that. The books in question painted a word picture. And the more that one meditates on it, the more one is likely to act out on it. I question why the authors of these books must tell graphic details unless their motive is to do more than tell a story. I read an online comment that said that the Bible is full of sex and violence, which is absolutely true, but it doesn't go into graphic details. I would encourage whoever shares those views to get to know the author. Why the need for vulgar language? It certainly doesn't add to the story. It lacks respect and it displays poor communication skills. And why is it important to encourage readers for the use of alcohol and drugs? If one feels what they're doing is morally right and it brings so much pleasure, why does it take a mood-altering substance to achieve their goal? Or does it require, liquid courage? I've asked the staff at a chemical abuse center, what are the signs of someone becoming an alcoholic? They said no one knows which drink will cause them to cross the line. Once the line is crossed, it's too late. What about marijuana? Long term, it shows brain damage. Did you know that marijuana is a gateway drug? We want our schools to be safe, but you are allowing them to decay from within. Why am I so adamant about this? It's because I'm a survivor of incest, which occurred to me between the ages of 3 and 4. And I wish somebody would have protected me. I will be that voice for those who have no voice. I've also been very involved with things relating to drugs, to alcoholism, to everything that is concerning in this book. Do you realize the traumatization you are putting through these children? I choose to continue to tell my story, which I will not have time to tell now. It's going to take a while. I would like to close with this. Whoever causes one of these little ones who believes in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depths of the sea. Matthew 18:6. Thank you for your time. Have a good evening. Amen.
Becky?
My name is Becky Linke, 1010 Spring Street in Somerset, Wisconsin. I've heard a lot from this book. New York Times bestseller, now a major motion picture, that was a while ago. Perks of Being a Wildflower by Stephen Chbosky. Charlie writes, I always wanted to be on a sports team like that, and I'm not exactly sure why, but I always thought it would be fun to have glory days. Then I would have stories to tell my children and golf buddies. I guess I would tell people about punk rocky and walking home from school and things like that. Maybe these are my glory days, and I'm not even realizing it because they don't involve a ball. My dad had glory days once. I've seen pictures of him when he was young. He was a very handsome man. I don't know any other way to put it. He looked like all those old pictures look. Old pictures look very rugged and young, and the people in photographs always seem a lot happier than they are. My mother looks beautiful in old pictures. She actually looks more beautiful than anyone except for maybe Sam. Sometimes I look at my parents now and wonder what happens to them to make them feel that way. Why they are the way they are today. My dad played college baseball for 2 years, but he had to stop when Mom got pregnant with my brother. That's when he started working at the office. I honestly don't know what my dad does. He tells a story sometimes. It's a great story. It has to do with the state championship for baseball when he was in high school. It was the bottom of the 9th inning, and there was a runner on first, and there were 2 outs, and my dad's team was behind by 1 run. My dad was younger than most of the varsity team because he was only a sophomore, and I think he thought that he was going to blow the game. He had all this pressure on him. He was really nervous and really scared, but after a few pitches, he started to feel in the zone. When the pitcher wound up and threw the next ball, he knew exactly where that ball was going to be. He hit it harder than any other ball he ever hit in his whole life, and he made a home run, and his team won the state championship. The greatest thing about this story is that every time my dad tells it, it never changes. He's not one to exaggerate. I think about all this sometimes when I'm watching a football game with Patrick and Sam. I look at the field and I think about the boy who just made the touchdowns. I think that these are his glory days for that boy. And this moment will just be another story someday because all the people who make touchdowns and home runs will be somebody's dad. And when his children look at his yearbook photograph, they will think that their dad was rugged and handsome and looked a lot happier than they are. I just hope I remember to tell my kids that they are as happy as I look in my old photographs. I hope that they believe me. It's insightful, it's charming. Yes, it contains sex and drugs and rock and roll. But that's not all it's about. It's the setting. The book is about so much more. It's not pornography.
Okay, moving on with our agenda. Looking at reports, looks like we don't have a representative. We do have, we'll go to the listen session summary. Was it Peter and Lori? Okay.
There were many people in attendance. There were some questions about the library material reconsideration process. Many positive comments regarding the book reconsideration 2023 link that is on our district website.
Anything else to add? Okay. Moving on to our superintendent's report.
All right, I have a lengthy list tonight, so stick with me here. Okay, so quick update regarding RFP for referendum. So Dave and Jody have been working on gathering a variety of examples. The goal is to get that distributed by June 1st. This is a busy time of year fiscally, with contracts and things going out as well, just within our business department, so that's kind of the goal at this point. Been able to, as I said, review a variety of samples from some districts that have just went out for RFP. Very similar projects to ours in terms of a project manager and an architect. So that's been helpful. And, you know, I'm looking for a little bit of input tonight on kind of your preference in terms of process. So, you know, Dave and I meeting, you know, our recommendation would be to kind of go about this more of a committee style, where we have 2 board members as well as Dave and I, Jody, likely Andrew, Tim Switch, kind of going through that day to day. My thought was Ian and Bruce being a part of that committee and then bringing a recommendation from the committee to the board as kind of that next step. In talking to districts, there's some, you know, advantages there in terms of just not having to wait so long to go through some processes. Obviously, as a board, we only meet twice a month, but bringing that committee together more frequently just helps the process to move along a little bit quicker. My suggestion obviously being Bruce and Ian with their background, having a lot of good knowledge and expertise, being able to have some good voice there too. Ultimately, we can do it however you prefer as a board, but that was something Dave and I wanted to bring to the table in terms of, sorry if you heard what I just said, but kind of working through this from a committee and then the committee bringing forward recommendations to the board in terms of next steps. The board obviously going through a formal approval process like you would in general, but I don't know if you have thoughts on that. You know, Bruce and Ian, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot in terms of your thoughts.
I think it follows the line of the oversight committee, same idea.
Okay. I don't know if anybody has any strong objections to going through it in that way, but that's how we'd like to proceed if we kind of get the thumbs up from the board.
And you included Tim Stitch,
Yep.
right?
Yep, so it'd be Dave and I, Jody, Tim, Andrew, since the majority of those projects will take place at the high school, especially the auditorium, et cetera. Ian and Bruce. I think that's everyone on my list.
So you don't think it's necessary to have Pam involved for the elementary? Is that more limited?
Not necessarily. I mean, she may need to be consulted on a kind of as-needed basis, but the majority of this discussion really, well, when I think architect project manager, my headspace goes to stadium and auditorium primarily. So I would say she probably wouldn't be super necessary for the purpose of the committee, but may have to be consulted. So I don't think I'm hearing any objection. Okay, cool. So that's how we'll move forward with that. So the next 2 things, 2 topics dealing with the development behind the district. Okay, so the hill behind the high school. I almost want to take a field trip. We won't, but the hill behind the high school. If you at this point walked up to the top of the hill and looked over, you would see basically a significant drop. Okay, that's a result of the excavating and et cetera that had to happen with the development as it was being built. So the developer approached the district wanting to know if we would be willing to partner in terms of helping to flatten out that cliff, which would mean we would lose at the peak of that hill out there about 12 feet in almost every tree that you see, in order to accommodate their request of fixing basically the excavation issues with kind of the cliff that they have right now, okay? So I walked out there with a couple people last week, we kind of walked through it. My, opinion would be that we don't touch the hill. Once we would lose any piece of that, we never get that back. That hill and the trees provide a really nice kind of natural barrier between the district and the development. There's advantages to kind of a natural sound barrier, a bit of a natural security barrier. It's also advantageous to the development because it maintains some of the lights down here and without kind of going over the top of the hill. So I want to just mention it because that was my initial response to them, and I told them I'd bring it to the board and just kind of run it past you, but I don't have an interest in touching that hill. We have no obligation to do anything with the hill. It would really just be out of good faith of helping the developer, but I don't want to touch the hill. I don't want to touch a tree. I want to leave it as is and then ultimately be up to them to figure out kind of a plan B. Any thoughts or ideas?
So are they trying to avoid a retaining wall in
Right.
there?
Mm-hmm.
They gotta be so far back off the property line anyway, right?
So that's my understanding. And it was a very amicable meeting and it was no hard feelings. They kind of said right away, like, we get it if it doesn't work. We just thought we'd start here. But that would significantly change the landscape of that hill back there. And I really don't have an interest in doing that. So wanted to at least just put it on the table, make sure we were all on the same page. But that was the direction I was gonna move.
I support that direction.
Okay.
I don't think we want to remove the natural barrier for all the reasons that you said.
Right.
Noise, safety, light. I don't think it would help the district in any way to move forward.
No.
Is there a way we can document how close they are to those trees that are there? Because a lot of times, even though you're off the property line, if they kill all those trees, they should be putting new ones back
Yeah,
in for us.
yeah. We do have a couple other spots where they're gonna have to fix a little bit of damage that was done to our property just based off of the building, which is all fixable and fine, but this is obviously significant and something I'm not real interested in doing, so.
Is there a safety issue from the perspective if kids pass over that hill?
So it wouldn't be our liability, but it's fairly steep. If you drive by it, you can see it, pretty clearly. So they'll have to get working on it kind of ASAP, which is why they connected with us last week. So.
What is their plan if we don't?
Well, they talked about retaining wall, and then they talked about, we'll have to look at our plans C and D as well, so I don't know what that means. They were, I think, hopeful that I'd say, let's trim the hill, and so, okay. The other piece, just real quick, so Xcel Energy came out last week as well. Again, because of the development, they're having to bury some additional lines and are asking at no cost to the district, which would be great because this will be of good benefit to the district. They're going to create some additional loops on campus that will actually help if we have some power outages and things like that. It may have to mean creating some easements around the district. So Tim and I were waiting to get some renderings of what exactly that would look like, knowing that once you put those in, that does limit a bit the development of that specific area. So I will provide you some pictures and some more information before we kind of start doing any level of digging, but it's free to the district. This is nothing but an upside to the district. They basically were like, we need your permission to be on your property. So, no concerns there. It was a pretty straightforward conversation, but I said before you start doing any level of digging, I want to see some visuals of where the easements have to go, what does that look like, as I'm trying to learn, I don't know, all the things in and out of Xcel Energy. So, okay, so if you have questions, let me know, but as I get more information, I'll certainly pass that along too. Strategic plan update. So last Monday, we held our second community stakeholder meeting. We had great turnout. Again, Lori and Lacey were there from the board, which was great. At this point now, we've been able to gather feedback from staff, students in grades 7 through 12, parents, community members, for those that filled out the survey. And through all of that, by the end of the meeting last Monday, through the work of that committee, we were able to see some themes that were starting to emerge from our data, which is really exciting, and I think some really great things are going to come out of the strategic plan. kind of next steps is working with Partner Ed and the admin team. So we have a Google Meet set up next week. We will start kind of diving a little bit further into those themes. Then we'll bring back some initial recommendations to our staff and that community stakeholder group within the next 2 weeks. And the goal, which we will hit, is I will bring you as a board a first reading of the proposed strategic plan, which again is the strategies, right? Remember, as a board, you're approving the strategies, and then the admin team and staff will start creating the action steps. But I'll bring that to the June 5th meeting. So the idea will be that you'll get the information that you need June 5th. Obviously, not looking for action on the 5th, and then a couple weeks to have any questions that you might have, and then looking for approval at our second June meeting. So a lot of work has to be done between now and then in order to be able to bring you a finished draft, I will say, on June 5th. But I don't know, Lori and Lacey, if you have any comments on just, kind of what you saw or heard from that process last week.
I think the same as before. There was a lot of different feedback, a varied amount of people within the community, within students, staff. But there was some good discussion.
So did you say that you were going to bring it back to the strategic planning committee before the board?
So we're going to have them put an eye on it one more time before the board. It'll have to be electronically. We won't get everybody back together again, but we have some surveys and things that we've already created to be able to kind of say, hey, take a look at these. Does this represent our conversation? Does this represent, kind of what we ended up leaving with last Monday at the end of that meeting, to make sure we aren't missing anything. And then we'll actually do the same thing with staff one more time too, since they've been highly engaged in kind of getting us to this part. Just to make sure, again, from a staff perspective, what else are you seeing that we need to make sure is in there, or is there something in there that, wait a minute, we didn't talk about this, just to kind of do some checks and balances. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be, we're at kind of a pivotal time for our district. Anytime you end a strategic plan and start a new one, looking at the work that we've done the last 5 years, I mean, that's a lot of work and really quite impressive. And now moving into kind of the next 5-year plan, some really neat ideas have come out of all of our stakeholder groups and our different, different stakeholders. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be a really nice roadmap for some things to help move our district forward. So
I would just like to add that the comments made by staff and students in the strategic planning survey that went out, that community members could access as well, that those comments were shared with the strategic planning committee, and they were very impressive. And the concern that students expressed for their teachers was powerful and heartwarming. And is it possible that those comments could be shared with the rest of the board?
Yep.
Thank you.
You brought up the student piece, and I'll just say this really quick before I go to my last thing, but that was something that the facilitators brought up on multiple occasions, was how insightful and engaged our students were about topics that they said in most districts, kids aren't talking about the financial health of a district. Kids aren't talking about making sure our teachers are okay. They even brought it up to me. I had a Google Meet with them yesterday as just a little debrief, and they brought it up again. And I think it's sometimes in processes that you do in schools, the kid's voice and perspective kind of gets pushed off to the side. So I'm really excited about, the perspective that kids brought, not only in the survey that we had kids fill out, but obviously we had some student representatives at this meeting. We had 2 focus groups of students at the high school that our consultants met with too. So that, I think, will be much more loud and clear in the strategic plan than it was our previous one, which again is, to me, is exciting. So thank you. Yes, I will. I don't have them, but I will get the information from Partner Ed, and I'll pass it along.
Thank you.
Okay, so the last thing I had, so we didn't have a Spartan Spotlight this month because I tried a couple groups, and with crazy schedules and graduation this week, it just couldn't work. So I said, all right, I'm going to find a couple celebrations of my own just to make sure I shout out here. So music department. So this is concert season for the spring. And so if you've had an opportunity to attend or maybe even see on Facebook what's been happening in every one of our buildings from our music department is really, really impressive. And I would also put on top of that Grandparents' Day. I mean, one of the greatest days of the year, right? That staff is really working hard, and I know they keep, again, reiterating, our season has been awesome, but can't wait until we can do it in an auditorium, right? So they're pumped. But we have had amazing concerts, kids doing just amazing things in our performing arts, which has been fantastic. Want to specifically mention for our high school, State Solo and Ensemble was last week, and we had our jazz band as well as Adeline Ghetto with a trumpet solo win the Exemplary Award, which is the highest level that you can get at State Solo and Ensemble. That means that those performances were the best of the day at the sites they were at. Those are rare, those are things that don't happen every day, so I want to make sure I shouted that out because that takes a ton of hard work. Middle school talent show, so I had the pleasure of attending that last Friday. If you've ever had the opportunity to attend a middle school talent show, my goodness, was that the highlight of my month. So, you know, I'm amazed at watching those kids get up there in front of middle school, especially in front of their peers, and sing and play guitar and dance. And the little guy that won was amazing, doing stuff with a bow staff, and it was just, and the kids were standing up and cheering, so it was awesome. I know Don Peer and the student council at the middle school put that together, so that was really impressive. Wanted to give a shout out to Amber Varize and the 5th grade students for their Kindness Quilt project. Hot off the presses, she sent an email today that they officially raised $1,566, which is awesome. The winner was chosen, and I don't believe it was anyone in this room.
Are you sure?
So I'm positive. Yeah, I saw the name. Although I don't know everyone in the audience, but I don't think it was anybody here. And so the 5th grade voted, and that money is going to go to a combination of Coco's Heart Rescue, the American Cancer Society, and the Children's Hospital. If this isn't what we want our kids to be about, like I mean, that gives me goosebumps just talking about it. So that was really amazing. Kudos to Miss Breeze in the 5th grade for an amazing project. And the last thing I have, so this is exciting. DPI finally listened to school districts in terms of allowing us to start talking about our state assessment data. So as you are probably familiar with, typically once we get it back, and right now we have lots of data that we're trying to kind of mine through, we aren't allowed to talk about it in any way, shape, or form publicly, including with the board, until late in the fall. So often you're left with, you know, us as administrators giving you kind of vague, it's exciting, we did well, right, but just wait and see. So DPI is now allowing us to share summary data with your school board. We can talk about it, we can't come up and give a big fancy presentation, but we can give you some information to give you some idea of how did things go with state assessment. So we have ACT information, and we have 9th and 10th grade pre-ACT information. That's a new assessment this year, so we don't have any real context yet in terms of looking at our scores, what does that mean, or how did we do? So a lot of that will be internal, but I did want to talk about the ACT. Typically, that's the most recognizable assessment that we give. And unfortunately, I can't give you anything, so I'm sorry, you're going to have to listen to me talk about how great it is this year, so here we go. So our composite this year was a 20.8. Last year, our composite was a 20.6. Okay, so moving up, which is great. Math composite was a 20.3. Last year it was a 19.5. So that's a 0.8 increase, and as you know, we've been working hard in math at the high school. Science was a 21.3. Last year it was a 20.5, so that's an increase of 0.8. STEM was a 21.1. Last year it was a 20.2. That's a 0.9 increase from last year. Reading was a 21.4. Last year it was a 20.8. That's a 0.6 increase from last year. Writing was a 6.9. Last year 6.3. So that was a slight increase at 0.6. ELA was 20.1. Last year it was 19.4. So that's a 0.7 increase. And our one decrease this year was in English. It was a 19.7. Last year it was a 21. So that was a decrease of 1.3. So I just listed for you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 components of the ACT. 7 of those were increases and 1 decrease. So that is a huge celebration. I don't have any other data right now that I can share, I don't know what that'll look like with our report card and those kinds of things, but as you know, specifically at the high school, there's been a lot of work put in by our staff and students to kind of keep the train moving. So a ton to celebrate there, and I want to commend them, staff and students, for the work they've done this year. That's really exciting. So with that said, those are my district celebrations. I don't think I have anything else. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions regarding the financial reports or the enrollment report?
We're gonna talk to Dave separately.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, then moving on to our book challenge appeal process. As we discussed at our last meeting, this meeting is now for us to finalize how, as a board, we will move forward. We're not necessarily looking at the specific book at this meeting, but looking at the process that we will take as a board, since this is all new to us. The policy kind of states what to do up until this point, and now it's come to us, and we had discussed at our last meeting some of those steps. I sent out this morning a document basically outlining what we had talked about at the last meeting, but just kind of taking that wording and putting it into a different format to go through steps for appeal to the school board as follows. The criteria used by the board when evaluating books, resources on reconsideration, and then it ends with, in reviewing the materials, the school board will consider the following. I guess as a board, if there are questions to that, if there are things to add, things to note, this is the time to do it, because our next step then after this will be us going through this process and then looking at the book that has been sent to us as a board. So comments, questions, things to add, things to take out? Bruce, you put in a couple of things
Yeah,
that
and I was just
I
referring-
noted that I changed, as you had put just a couple like little wording pieces
Yeah, he refers to school board. Are we just putting the board in? For all I know, it's kind of a.
of the board. Yeah, and then in lots of Trevor's things, it was the school board vote.
Yeah, I was just, and then, so is this gonna end at step 4? And then that criteria is separate? Because that's really our process through step 4, and the criteria was just something extra? Is that correct?
So
Like
step
we're-
4, if the board votes to affirm the determination of its educational experts, the matter is final. If the school board sends the issue back to the district administrator with further instructions, the matter may ultimately be appealed back to the board. But then the step before that, the school board will vote either to affirm the determination of the review committee, overturn the determination of the committee, or send the matter back to the district administrator for further consideration. So those kind of 3 options: affirm, overturn, or send back.
So are these more options than steps? We're choosing one over the other?
I think all of these are pieces in the process. And so when I was looking at Trevor's document, I highlighted, the important parts of each of those 5 steps. And I couldn't highlight on the document, so I made a comment and I put the parts that I had highlighted in all capital letters. So I think what, according to the document that we got from Trevor, we review the written record of materials. We fully review and consider all previous decisions and steps taken throughout the process. We may request additional information if we need it. We will review the record and findings along with any additional arguments presented on appeal, and that appeal letter is in the document that we have in the folder. And then we vote to affirm, the 3 things that Lacey said: affirm, overturn, or send it back for further consideration. So it's our purpose that we are ensuring that the proper processes were followed and that the district experts have considered the guiding principles above. And you included the rubric as well, which shows those guiding principles. So it's all of those steps are part of it.
know that there's been some talk about just us as a board reading the book. I know it was brought up at the last meeting, like, it's not necessarily the board's position that we have to read the book, but I also feel like it goes back to, there's the piece in here that I think kind of contradicts that, is that when reviewing a particular book or resources, that the material be judged as a whole rather than a review of mere excerpts. And I feel like that on both sides, you know, I've gotten as far as emails that we've gotten, I think, as a board, and on both sides, kind of looking at that. If we're gonna make this decision, I completely agree to look at, okay, that process, but I feel like there needs to be more, as a board, are we saying we are reading the book?
I read the book, so I don't have a
Well,
problem.
yeah, I mean, and that's, I think some of the discussion that I've gotten, is yes, we're overseeing the process that it was done, but I feel like we've kind of, this was kind of two contradicting things, like, you don't have to read the book, but we're also looking at the book as a whole, and I know that we're
Well, I think
looking at the
book as a
committee that they
whole
did that.
is the committee's responsibility.
I'm reading the book, I'm going to read the book, and I guess I would urge all of us to do the same.
I think we have to, if we're going to overturn or affirm the decision, I think you have to make it.
So, if you want to make that a requirement, then we're looking at possibly extending the process even longer. And we're already looking at 3 years.
I just think it's irresponsible to try and make a decision out the door.
So, do you need, can it be a requirement that the board has it done by the time the committee puts forth their recommendation?
Well, and I think now the new process, how you're saying, like, we have,
But we don't
this
know if
one, this one's the first one, like, this is kind of unique, because this is the first time we're going through this process. But I think then looking at the next steps, and I think that's been clear now on the website, we know now the next 3 books that are coming up. So I think, okay, this is kind of trial run, this first one, I hate to say that, but it is the first one, so you know, what's our plan then going forward? If we're reading the book, how long do we need, and when will be that meeting that we will discuss it? And then I think going forward, having those 3 books in a time period is more feasible than, okay, here's one, we kind of have that time period to do
Yeah,
that.
the other thing I'm thinking about is we are already spending $3,000 to $4,000 on copies of the books for the committee. And if every board member cannot get a copy of the book, do we want to spend more money and buy more copies of the books?
If we're gonna read all the books and make a decision based on that, why do we have a committee? You know?
Which is another,
Yeah.
Isn't that what he says in here, it's unnecessary for the school
Right.
board, or does it
Yeah.
need to read through the actual materials?
We're supposed to make sure that they followed the process.
And there's nothing stopping a board member from reading the book. It's just not
That's right.
required, and it does not have to interfere with the timeline.
Right.
We don't know if it would be appealed.
well, that's the other thing, as you're saying, so like, there's the 3 books coming up, well, if that committee makes the decision to say, we're removing this book, well, then we don't, you know, it's not gonna get appealed then to come back from us, unless a process, I guess, appealed on another piece of it. I like to read, so I'll read books, but I just think that we need to have that system as far as a board. And I get what you're saying, Barge, because that our job is to oversee what was done. But then I also think it kind of contradicts itself when it says to look at it as a whole, because I feel like I personally have a better understanding of that if I read it. But that's my.
It's like we're saying we don't trust our committee's decision. That's what I feel like. So why make us all read it when, I mean, I've read the book, so.
Well, and maybe that's just, I mean, we don't make it, it's not a requirement, it's just something that we choose as a board member if we want to read it or not. We don't have to put it in writing. And, you know, in all honesty, sometimes there's books that you start reading and you're like, okay, I got a pretty good understanding of this. I might not read it front to cover. But this is a big decision. I mean, saying if, once these books have gone through this process that this committee has spent hours and hours on, and then it comes to us, it's a big deal. I mean, I think it needs to be taken seriously by
Well, it is.
both pieces.
But the way we did it was that we were to see that they did the right process. They followed the rules. We're not here to say the book is good or the book is bad. That's what the committee is going to give us, and we need to trust them.
I don't think it's a trust thing as much as they're appealing the decision. So if we're gonna look at that, I think we just have to know what we're talking about.
But that's not what we're doing. We're looking at the process they followed. We're not saying it was right or wrong of them to say yes or no.
I know what you're saying. That's the way it reads to me when I read the policy.
So, one of the questions I have, meets age appropriate for reading level and maturity level. So, what age level are we considering this to be? Because for an 18-year-old, absolutely it could be. For a 14-year-old, there's a huge difference between a freshman and a senior in their ability to comprehend things from an adolescent or adult level. So what criteria is being used for that? Do we know?
Yeah, it's in one of the documents that
In the document,
they're
yeah.
given. There's 3 recommended maturity levels from 3 different groups. I mean, there is 1 recommended maturity level from 3 different groups: the school library journal, Common Sense Media, and the publisher. This particular one says 7 through 12, grade 9 and up, and age 16 and up. So they're supplying, 3 different sources for a recommended maturity level. The committee did. And that's their job to provide that information, to consider that information. The maturity level, that's one of the items in the list.
I'm gonna go a little off topic here, but it was brought up at our last meeting, I believe, like, is there any middle ground? I'm looking at, like, you say 16 and up. Is there any way, I mean, one of our public comments was not necessarily saying to parent, like, no, I don't want this book, but is there like a middle ground to make this inclusive to everybody as far as any parent gets it, yes or no? You know, like a big scope as far as not saying to parents, if you don't want your kid to read this book, do this, but just a yes or no. Like, as a parent, I'd get something to say, are you comfortable with your child
Having full access.
having full
to the
access, or are you
library.
not, yes or no? So it's
And
not
what
just
if
putting
they
it
say
towards
no?
the negative, well, then those would be flagged.
Checking out that penny book.
Flaked for what is what I'm wondering about, because how is any committee or person in the district supposed to know what any parent in the district is going to object to? What you object to might be different than what I object to.
Of course, but that's where as a parent, you'd have that. I'm just saying, what was kind of put back to a group of parents was, no, they can't. But as a parent, I could say, yes, I'm comfortable with that. Not just putting it in that towards one group of parents, but toward all group to just have that. So if there are
The
books.
general permission slip.
It kind of, if there's books flagged as sensitive content, not just putting it towards the group of parents that are saying, no, we don't, but as a parent, I could say, yes, I'm comfortable with that. My child's able to check out any book they'd like.
So
There
who's-
are a lot of.
I don't know, this is completely brainstorming. I'm just trying to we heard a lot of really diverse conversations tonight, and I'm just trying to, as a board member, instead of saying sorry and making one group really upset and making one group, is there any middle ground we can come to?
We have many situations in the district where we have, I think they're called, Shannon, help me please, I think they're called passive.
Passive permission?
Yes.
Yep.
So that if you don't fill in the permission form, it's assumed that it's okay.
That is okay.
You know, I think that might be something that might be workable. Shannon, do you have an opinion?
Middle ground, you bet, let's do it, let's figure it out, let's make it happen. I think there's, well, now that I've got the floor here, I think it's important to recognize that like my job is to follow the board policy that you've set. Whether I agree, whether I disagree, because nobody would have any clue, truly, what my personal stance is on any of these books, right? So the policy currently reads XYZ, which people are familiar with, which is what I have to put forward and I have to enact. That is why you hired me, right? To fulfill and carry out the board policy as it stands. Policy can be changed at any time, absolutely. That got brought up earlier. Sure, policy can change, you bet. But until then, I am bound to what our policy says. And as I said when we had the policy committee meeting, I know Matt was there, you weren't there, Sheree was there. Like, I am very open to having discussion about our policy because I think there are some gaps. I've been very open about that from the day one. There are some things that I think we can do better in our policy. Until that happens, this is what I'm bound to. Whatever my personal beliefs are, it doesn't matter. That's what my job is. So if there's a place to find middle ground, I mean, I've got notes from districts all over the place that are doing things that we would just have to figure out what works for here, what works for Somerset, what works for our families, what works for our staff, what works, I mean, like, you bet, let's have that conversation. I mean, I am super open to that. Because I think there are some ideas that could be able to satisfy everyone's vested interest in wanting to do what's right for their own particular kids. 100%, couldn't agree more. I have a kid in that building. Like, I get it, I hear you, I hear you. I am willing to have any conversations or entertain ideas, absolutely. And then let's talk about it, for sure. So, that's my 2 cents. Let's do it. I'm not trying to be difficult, I'm not trying to create issues. I am charged with creating executing our policy as it's created right now. That's why the books are back on the shelf. That's why the committee is made up of the way it is. Not because I handpick people. This is the way it's laid out. Lots of districts have parents on the committee. Great, let's tweak the policy then. But that's not the way ours is written out. So I'm carrying it out the way it is. There's my rant, sorry, there we go. But middle ground, let's do it.
Regardless of what the board comes up with what we think would be a middle ground, that may still not make everyone happy.
I'm just throwing ideas out, because I know, I think we've all known, you can never make everybody happy, but how can we maybe look at,
So do you want to suggest?
I mean, this is again, I was off topic. I think it's something that we need to really start exploring.
I think it's very much on topic.
Because I think now we're talking about, this is appealed, it's coming to us, and we're talking about time that it takes, and hours of staff, and now hours of board. And I think that's our due diligence as an elected board. However, how can we, as like what Marge is saying, okay, now the committee has done all this work, they're saying it's appropriate, it's going back, and now it comes on us. And yes, I agree, Marge, that we're now looking at, I respect the committee for all their work and all of the time that they put in, but it's also, as a board, it's now in our hands and our due diligence to do those pieces as well. But how can you, I'm trying to look at both sides. I'm trying to look at how can we be respectful of parents that aren't comfortable and be respectful of other parents not deciding what other people are gonna read.
So we can suggest.
And there's no perfect answer. What, any suggest, I mean, there is no, I completely agree, you are not gonna make everybody happy. I do that on a daily basis, not make everybody happy. But I think we need to look at how can we respect our teachers and our staff that are doing the work of going through all of this. I think our people that we're hearing from, our students, our community members, and us as a board to go through the process and make sure that we're doing it correctly. But as Shannon's saying with the policy, this is all new to us. I mean, there are things that we could change. This is all new. This is the first time we've been through this.
So we still need to have our process.
That part, something you could reach out to the person requesting reviews?
Sure.
And see if it satisfies them?
And what exactly are you asking Shannon to ask?
What Lacey was talking about?
What their opinion would be. Opinions from both sides.
And would that require any board action?
No. So if, I'd like to suggest that if you're trying to find a middle ground between people have to say yes or people have to say no, I would suggest a passive permission slip. Because in my experience, it is very difficult to get all the permission slips in. And so if it's a passive permission slip, then we are not putting restrictions unless there's a permission slip turned in that says, no, my child does not have permission.
So that would be just all library materials in general? That'd be the only
Well,
way
then it
around
goes into a whole other criteria of what then gets, what gets flagged.
Yeah, so I don't know how
I mean,
to
that's
flag
where
that.
you're a whole other, because we have this list, so I would assume that those would, I mean, do you necessarily flag the whole list, or do you flag the ones that if they go back through, you know, that's a whole other, and we're talking about staff's time and hours and things
People
like
brought
that.
up new books that come in. Now, how do they know? I mean, I think you're almost in the middle ground, but you're flagged from checking anything out unless the parent says, yes, they can check out encyclopedia or whatever
And
else.
Shannon, can you speak to the 16? Because I know I had asked about that before. As far as in our policy, it states that, that at that 16, but that's a state statute, correct? So
Yeah.
that's not anything that us
And
as
that
a
you can probably speak to
board.
that too. I know that was one
Well, we
big
talked-
question you had.
We talked to Chris with
Yep.
NOLA, and it's state statute.
So it's nothing that us
Kinda
as a board could
stuck.
change
Yeah,
that policy
it's not a
as far as
Somerset
18.
thing, it is a state statute, right. And I think just, you just said something that triggered a thought that I had too, because alongside of all of this, that's the work that's happening with kind of navigating the reconsideration, you know, we're having a lot of internal dialogue, which again, I think will help make us better as a system regarding how are we currently communicating to parents, you know, every year, new books that come into our libraries? How are we better advertising some of the resources we have available that we've had for a long time that parents probably just don't know exist in terms of finding out if certain books are in our libraries and those kinds of things. It shouldn't be something parents have to, you know, go through 58 steps to be able to figure out, right? So I took some notes here, but how can we better communicate not only the books that we currently have, new books coming in. I've had some conversations with a few people in some meetings, their parents that have wanted to meet, about what does that process look like for even helping to have a voice at the table in terms of books that are coming in, right? You know, and what does that process look like? And lots of schools have lots of ways that they do this, and so I think there's many ideas that can be on the table. Again, I think at the end of the day, many of these things just simply make us better at our processes and better communication and better transparency, because that's what we want too. Like this is never designed to be something we're hiding. but that needs to happen then with open dialogue that's kind, that's positive, willing to come to the table and just have some good conversation. Like, great, I will clear my calendar tomorrow and make it happen, because I think all these things are good things ultimately for the district. And as I said, as we've been kind of learning some things now going through this process, you know, there are some things that we're talking about, just simply how do we be better? And I think that's important just to kind of say out loud that we aren't sitting around a table every day like, nope, we've got it all figured out, because like, there are many things that we're like, okay, how do we improve this? Clearly, this has come up now in terms of communication and transparency and those kinds of things. Good, how do we just make that better? So.
Would you be able to, from things that you've gotten from other districts, and I don't want to put something else on your plate, but just as you get, you know, some of those ideas from other districts, as you get some of those middle ground kind of areas, just even like, you know, compiling a list that us as a board can kind of maybe discuss or share with other, you know, parents or a committee of some sort or a group of some sort like that?
Yes.
I mean, I know that, I'm not saying,
Yeah.
oh, by next meeting have this,
Yeah.
but I know even Lee during some of board development was talking about like a book scanner of some sort that had, I don't know, and I maybe can do a little research itself, but.
Well, it also sounds like we don't want to keep this same policy for 3 years of book reviews.
Well, I know, we kind of talked about that.
That's something we put on hold, where we go through this first one and make our review on this first, and then we take some of these points into consideration and update the policy. I mean, because we have 30 of them in place. I mean, if we're really going down a path where we're meeting middle ground, if we're following what we said, we're not adjusting for
right.
years, which I think we all want to make an adjustment.
I agree. At the policy committee meeting, the last one, you said you had all kinds of ideas and suggestions. Yeah, I say, let's finish this and let's fix the policy.
And then see how that.
Let's fix the policy.
Well, okay. But the recommendation is not to change the policy in the middle of this, is that correct?
Well, so I wouldn't suggest changing the policy until you've made a decision on whatever's happening with the current book that's sitting in appeal, right? And I also kind of want to just speak to a little bit just the timeline of this, and I know it got brought up tonight, and I know it's been brought up before, of just like, you know, people need to understand 26 books in addition to, you know, a full plate already with our staff, and that takes time. We have staff that are not 12-month employees, so reading books over the summer. I mean, there's other components to this, not because we're dragging our feet. I don't want to do this for 3 years either, trust me. But I also have to be realistic about our manpower and our resources that we have to be able to do the volume of books that are sitting in front of us. The policy is not designed for this volume of books. It's designed for a book. And so I will publicly say, I am all about, let's look at the policy. I'm happy to give you, I will send, you know, samples and things that other districts have done, because we aren't the only ones that have had to go through this of like, oh man, our policy maybe doesn't have all the stuff in it we maybe should. That's why I have all these samples, because about every other day I have a superintendent saying, look at this, take a look at this, take a look at this, because I'm actively seeking like, what are other districts doing, and then how do we incorporate that into what makes sense for Somerset, right? We're not Wayzata, we're not Egan, so what does that look like here to be able to make sure we have a really good process on the front end, right? I know I mentioned in the policy committee, you know, outlining, you know, what should that committee look like? There should be, you know, steps built into the policy for the board, so you guys aren't having to do this, right? To make sure it stays within the role of the board, right? And so I will provide you with as many samples as you want to see, absolutely. My recommendation is, I think you have to get through the book that's sitting on the table right now, and then have those conversations is my personal recommendation, but as a board, obviously, you can do what you want to do.
Well, wasn't it also the attorney's recommendation?
Correct. Yep.
But after this first book, it could be something that could be looked upon, so we can
Sure.
try to make things easier on everybody's.
Yeah, and I know many districts have built into their policies now the options for the middle ground, right? So it's not just us kind of, right now, we're kind of coming up with it because we're doing the best we can, But those things can be very explicitly spelled out, again, after discussion here of what makes sense here, right? So,
So, looking at renting a movie, you know, you have to confirm you're over 18 to check out a movie that has sexually explicit content or violence or whatever it is. Can these books be in a separate area that a 14-year-old doesn't have access to? So there's one other step of protection for the parents, that one step to be able to get to that, and it's not just sitting on a shelf that anyone can have access to and read it during their break.
Right.
Without checking it out if a parent is not okay with that.
yeah, so I would say just in my limited research, districts haven't necessarily done that because most, again, even just trying to gather as many samples as possible, not necessarily separating, and I'll just say kind of those books, because again, some of that is very subjective, right? Like what you determine to be sexually explicit, I don't, et cetera, right? So a lot of districts, I just saw 2 sample policies where they went to more of a system of mature content, right? And having some systems in place for what kind of defines that, knowing that, again, you know, we all may have a different definition of what that means, right? But having a system in place, not necessarily that they're off in a different spot, but that potentially if you pick up a book, you know, there would be at least some visual of, you know, again, I'm just using the term mature content because that was one that I saw today. I'm not saying that's what we have to use or that we should use, but I think there's this balance too between just being really careful that, you know, you're not, and I know I used this term before, kind of shadow banning is an actual term. We want to be careful about that, but I also hear what, even public comment, like I agree, we want to be diligent and aware of A, what's in our library, and B, when kids are picking up books, I don't care what book it is, at least having some surface knowledge of what's in it when I start reading it, right? I think that's fair. I think that's appropriate. I think we can do all of those things. Again, for me, that kind of lands in that middle ground, but also being really careful we're not doing something on one side or the other that puts the district at risk from a litigation standpoint. And that's something I'm trying to keep in my mind as well a lot. As part of my job too, to try to keep us out of trouble. So I think there's a variety of versions of stuff, of something like that, that we can certainly have some conversations and talk about, so.
Don't you think if you put books in a different room, the kids are gonna say, oh gosh, I'm 18, I
Well-
wanna go to that room, you know? That's the way kids are.
Yeah, I
you
think
know?
there is some school of thought that way as to why districts haven't kind of said, in the secret room, you know, I'm just, right? So.
Well, Trevor also said behind the curtain, Trevor also said in one of the documents that you sent us, you forwarded, something about they have, I'm not even sure if legally we can put them in a special place in the library. We could maybe put, like, at the middle school, when we had the AR program, there were little stickers on all the books that gave the reading levels. We could maybe put stickers on books that have mature content perhaps, but I think they still legally have to be
Yeah,
in the library.
and I do think anything like that, which again, you bet, let's have that conversation. I think the follow-up to that has to be, there's never gonna be a perfect answer, kind of like you were saying, right? There's always gonna be that gray where you think something, I think something, and, right, you think it's mature and I don't, whatever. You happen to be across from me, Ian, that's why I keep doing this. Yeah.
That's all right.
So, you know, that's come up even in our internal conversations as we've talked about options like that, of some of the pros and cons of, you know, we don't want that to open up another can of worms of, you know, whatever, but, you know, we want to do the best that we can. We're not trying to divide, we're not trying to do anything other like, I hear you, I hear everything that everyone is saying, and how can we figure out a way to make this work? So.
It would be much more productive if we could have some compromise instead of just
Yeah,
one way
I think
or
that's
the
a fair
other.
statement.
So I think I'm hearing that everybody is in support of going through, we need to go through this book first with how we're moving, And then after we're done with this process, then re-looking at that policy to make sure that now we're into it, we're covering all of those pieces, and we can make some of those adjustments and clarifications and probably add some more processes that we can get from other things.
Well, I'd also like to get clarification from the attorney on if there's going to, if we're opening ourselves up to litigation by changing the policy before getting through all the books.
All 30,
Exactly.
I think as long as that committee hasn't started, if they've started looking at a book, then you can't change it. But if they haven't started, that way we're all working on the same.
That's all well and good, Matt, but I want to hear it from Trevor.
You know, I agree.
Sure, I can follow up with him, yeah, and just, yeah.
Did Chris from Neola, when you were talking about this with policy review, did he have any examples of more detailed policies within?
We didn't really go down that road.
Okay.
Because she said she had a lot of ideas for some changes, so we just had a general discussion.
So one thing, if I remember, if it was that meeting with Chris, he had said that a place you could start is going back to the original policy that has all the options, right? Because this policy came with a variety of options, and that as a board, you could at least start there and determine, are there any of these options here that we want to go back, and now that we know what we know and kind of been through this a little bit, that we want to take a look at those, in addition to, are there still some other pieces maybe outside those, samples from other districts, those kinds of things that we feel are appropriate that we want to put into that policy. So I think it's a combination of both, so, which we can do. And I think that actually, that original policy with the options, I had him put it back into drafts.
Yes.
So you should have access to it. We haven't talked about it yet until this point, but you should have access to it. So that might be a good place as a board member to start, at least just refreshing, because I'm sure, I can't imagine you'd remember what the options were, right? That might be a good place to start and just see, what does Neola lay out for what you could do, and then have some additional conversation of other pieces to add in, if you so choose.
Okay.
So if we come back, make our final determination on this book on June 5th, is that the Monday? June 3rd?
5th.
June 5th. Then after that, the following meeting, we can start addressing, doing a review of that policy. And you're gonna find out from Trevor if that's acceptable, even though we have open challenges per the existing policy.
Yeah.
So with this document, are we okay with the book review and appeal process at the board level? That's in front.
Steps 1 through 4.
Yes.
Well, I'd like to, I don't know, I didn't look at, I looked at your rubric, but I didn't examine it carefully enough. Is there a way that we can put our steps into a rubric type form so we can have a checklist instead of this narrative document?
Yeah. Really, I just put with the criteria that's used by the board when evaluating, so that they've looked at, that we're saying that the committee has looked at these areas. So then I just put like a bullet or a square there. Resources should support and enrich the curriculum and or students' personal interest in learning. So that's all coming from
The rubric?
their rubric.
And that came from the policy.
Right.
So then would we use this document as you sent it and just check off these little boxes that are in the front?
And we could put it, so kind of have
But
it
I
more
don't
of
think
like.
that's the part that we're supposed to be checking. We're
Well, I think that
supposed
we
to-
checked that the committee examined those pieces.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right? It's
So
not how,
if you have
not
questions, you do
our
your questions.
personal, but we're saying
all
the
that.
committee looked at this area. The committee looked at
you'd say the committee, we didn't find evidence that the committee had resources that should support and enrich the curriculum and the students' interest in learning. You'd say we didn't. Or was that pointed out, right? Is that what you're stating?
I don't know, I'm just looking at the steps for the appeal process and what we as a board need to do. So I'm wondering if there's another way that we can combine this so that we could have a rubric? I don't know.
Yeah, I think we're using the criteria and the bullet points. But then the only thing we'd have posted is the steps 1 through 4. And as long as they've done all those bullet points. So we review the written record from, that was given to us already. And if we need more information, we would ask, I guess, now in the next 2 weeks or even at that meeting.
The questions really come from the criteria that we have laid out here.
Yeah.
Not just
Not just out of the blue, it'd be
It's-
these comments.
Based off this
This
criteria.
bullet point list that they were supposed to establish.
Because that's what ties to policy.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah, exactly in the policy, the criteria for selection of materials. It's,
And really, whether you agree or disagree with it, does it apply?
and
For a policy.
was there evidence that the committee examined those?
Regardless of what your opinion, really.
Right.
Because at this point, our policy says, this isn't about popular opinion, it's about what does policy say and how does it apply to this book?
And if the committee didn't, or follow, or we don't feel as a board that they followed one of these, we would request additional information that would support or be against, depending on side. For this one, this book could be support that bullet point, correct? And they would have to come back with that. So if we met next week and said, you've only met these 4, we would request you address the following 4, correct?
Can you provide evidence that
Yeah.
this was?
Or we say, no one has any questions, we think you've addressed all of them that are on the list, based on the packet that we have. And then we would move into affirm or overturn, I guess.
You're just, Laura, kind of looking for a different format?
I was
So we
thinking of
can have
something.
better like documentation on our end?
Yeah. I
But-
can,
I mean, it's,
But it's not necessarily the content, it's the format.
it's the, so we have things that we can check off that, yep, we looked at all,
Yep.
we looked at this, we looked at this, we looked at this, and the committee's recommendation had everything that our policy says it has to have.
Okay, so can we agree content's good? And within that, we can take the content and maybe, blind copy kind of how we want to format it. It's really what's in this, just how, as a board, when we look through it.
It would really be for me, I'd look at this criteria and I would check each one of
Right.
these.
That's what
Right,
I was
basically,
thinking too.
I'm gonna go through this, and I'm gonna look for that, and I'm gonna check it off when I find it, and if I don't, or there's something missing, I'm gonna jot that down as my question.
Or circle it, any more info on this one.
Yeah, and when each one has a check mark, I know, well, I looked,
I found all of them.
policy, yeah, the policy and their review match. Again, regardless of my opinion, they match,
And maybe,
we're following policy at this point.
and maybe when we come to review it, we say, does anybody have questions on that first one? And it's, maybe some of us checked in, some of us didn't. I don't know if we have to get that in depth, or that's a bad thing.
Well, so that was my question 2 weeks ago, was if I have a question, do I get to ask that, or is the board as a whole decide to ask that? Do I ask it in an email ahead of time? Do I wait for the next meeting? That was my question 2 weeks ago too. Or even if I ask it, if no one else here agrees with me, do we just all agree, we just move on? Kind of like once we're on the table. I mean, if there's multiple people that have a question, great, if not.
I think as a group, we can have that discussion, like if you're saying, hey, we can have that as a board, but if we're going back, then it's more of, what's the word you used? We can't,
Hearing?
yes, thank
Right.
you. Be asking questions directly at the time with Shannon or committee members, but if we have that discussion as a group,
And the board
and
as
I
a
think
whole.
if there's one specific area, I'll take the first one, for example, that resources should support and enrich the curriculum. And if, you know, four or three of us, if there's a majority in one area or not, then we could either take that and ask that question back and put it, or if we are saying consensus, yes, then we go through that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I think it does, as long as we remember all we're doing is documenting that the committee met that criteria.
Well, maybe we can just add that wording in, because right now it's just saying criteria used by the board when evaluating book resources for consideration, and maybe that just needs to be worded just a little bit different. Just looking at the policies.
The board has determined the review committee
Right.
used the following criteria as outlined in policy.
Say that again, Lori.
The board determined the review committee used the following criteria when making its recommendation.
Okay. And then, are we comfortable putting that on the agenda for our next meeting?
When will we, so are we gonna get another document, or are we using this one here?
We are using this one here with that change, addition.
Only thing I'll say is I will not be available at the June 5th meeting, so I'm really torn as I'm looking at this, you know. So I won't be here. I'm happy to put whatever in writing and have it for somebody to, you know, represent me, but that person's gonna just hang back with me.
Do we wanna put it on
Regular session?
the regular session, June 19th?
Well,
Push it out again.
who knows if someone else might
Right.
have to be gone.
Yeah.
So then, if we did it on June 5th, would we say, I'm thinking, you know, our work session is we discuss, for other processes, we discuss and then we approve or make the recommendation at the next one. Would we follow that same process, or would we say we would approve or deny or go back with questions at the next meeting? Would it be a two-step process or a one-step process?
I think it'd be one step. Hopefully, I mean, I think it'd be a one step unless we had a bunch of items that weren't gonna get addressed or we didn't feel were addressed.
Well, then it would go back to question anyways, right? If there was a lot of areas.
Right. But I think it'd be a one step. I think we just, and we could probably show up and vote on it first thing. Not first thing, but we can review it and say, you know, does anybody wanna make a motion, we do it, and then we kind of review.
Because each board member can document and we can just,
Because I mean, all of them are, or maybe, like I said, if we find that someone feels they didn't find it in there, then maybe we find where everybody else at that point was met. I don't know if that gets too far in the weeds. But I mean, I know we all wanna agree. End with.
Well, I think sometimes too, I don't wanna say dragging it on, that's not the right words, but I think the longer that we push it out, or the more meetings in between, I think the more, you know, there's a hot topic. I think there's a lot of in-betweens where, And we are saying it's a lengthy process, so I think by getting to this one and making that decision, then getting to the policy, we can keep moving forward.
So I agree with Bruce. It should be an action item on the June 5th agenda. Does anybody have a different opinion?
Marjorie?
So I think, Matt, if you are able to get your feedback to Lacey in advance, I'd like your voice to be
Yeah, I'm
part of our
happy-
conversation.
I'm happy to write something up.
Ooh, June 5th?
I do.
You have a conflict?
We all start checking calendars.
The summer.
Getting a little nervous too.
That's how it goes in the summer.
I'll be here.
I won't be.
I mean, we can get Matt's feedback in written, but he cannot be
Right.
part of the vote.
Right.
You can't have a vote by proxy.
So I will be gone as well. We have the CISA Board of Control meeting that night, the only Monday night meeting in the whole year.
So there would be 4 of us.
Do you have a conflict too, Bruce?
God, I mean, I don't have to go. I would come here. Put it first on the agenda and then get the heck out of here.
No, I totally get it. I would provide any feedback if I had some for discussion, but yeah, it wouldn't be a vote. Unless I can get on a phone, but I just don't know if I'll even have it, so.
So we would have enough to hold a meeting.
Barely.
You're making me nervous, all these people. What's going on
Check
in
your
June 5th
calendar.
anyway?
12-year-old baseball.
I'm good with 12-year-old baseball. I don't have a conflict.
I have 7-year-old baseball, but,
I'll forgive you.
well, I'm missing it now.
I coach.
There's not a band concert or anything, is there?
Huh?
It's not the fifth, it's
Who goes out
done.
for then?
It's in town, so I'll be here.
Okay, June 5th, that's our next scheduled meeting, so I feel like if we're going to do that.
Do we, as a review, are we sending comments for more information to Shannon or the committee? Is that something you want ahead of time? If we
I
don't
think
have
this is
something
what we
in there,
have.
That's what we got.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll show up that night. Talk.
Would you rather do the 19th, June 19th? I mean, I still know there's people that can't come, but would more people be in attendance?
I'm good.
I'm good on the 19th.
I don't either, I mean, but I thought I was just gonna say it, but I'm not gonna be here, so, but whatever you decide.
As a board, do we want to do the 5th? Or do you feel as though it's a topic that should be pushed out? I think there's pros and cons to both, because I think you have more voices heard pushing it out. But I also feel as though our meeting schedule is posted like months in advance to say if this is what's going on our next agenda, it's on our next agenda. Marjorie, Bruce, what do you guys think?
We can put it on the 5th. I don't have any conflict.
Okay, and even though, for those that can attend, even though you can't vote, I think it would be very valuable to have your input and that kind of piece that we went through for the meeting, if that's possible. Are you comfortable with that, Sheree?
Yeah. I would like my voice heard on that one, but, you know, if we can't, we can't. So.
So you.
So would you rather
wait until
prefer
the
to do
19th?
June 19?
Are we gonna have a different outcome? You know, two voices missing. I'm confident that you would understand, you know, if I've got any concerns on the checklist, that could be reiterated and.
Do we want to take a vote? I mean, I'm open to either one, so if people feel strongly, speak now or forever hold your peace, because.
You know, what does I hate it? If everyone can make the 19th, we should probably try to push it to the 19th, maybe the topic has,
Because it's a hot topic.
we
so
don't have this
everybody
many
voices.
people at board meetings. I don't wanna push it out either. Kinda like maybe it's to be a topic at the beginning, and then maybe it's that same meeting, we start reviewing the policy. I don't know if we can at a regular meeting, I don't know. 'Cause that's where I wanna be, I wanna start reviewing that policy to get the rest of this situation ironed out. Like, I don't wanna push, so if we put this at the beginning, we voted, and we did our thing, we could also talk about what we've had in that policy growth in the meantime to address it that night as well. And further discuss that portion, that makes sense.
I agree, and then on the 5th, we could get some feedback from Trevor on whether that would apply specifically to the middle of this entire review versus the
Sure.
first one.
And maybe that night we get feedback from people who aren't here, if there are open comments, and we need more information on, so that on the 19th, you know, we're all buttoned up and there isn't another review night to come back. Does that make sense? Like, if you do have comments, yep, we're reading them that night, and that checklist is not complete.
We had plenty of time on our end.
Yeah. And we don't have to, you know, air them, but where we feel it.
Are we
If there is
comfortable with the
additional
19th?
information.
Either is fine.
Okay, the 19th it is, let's move forward. So we'll use that process, the 19th, we'll put it as an action item, and we'll also then start looking at that policy at that time. Okay, moving forward to our advanced operations, looking at the policies that were presented at our last work session. Is there any questions or discussion with those policies or any other pieces that need to be addressed?
Yes, there was one, policy 8450. That's the only one that I know of that had comments added later. If anybody added comments to another one, please let us know. But then, those comments aren't on this attached document.
that's
You'd have to go to the,
Was that my comment?
yeah, I read one too.
One of them looks like it's been changed, and the other one was that I think we should leave coronavirus in with communicable diseases, because it is.
I have to get to the right document. I don't think I'm there yet. I have too many tabs open.
Let me know if you want me to reshare it, so it's at the top of your email.
Will you?
Yeah, could you?
Yep,
Sorry.
yep, no problem.
It was volume 32, right? Number 1 for the board?
Yes.
I've got it.
If Marge feels strongly to add coronavirus and it doesn't change the policy at all and change anything, I'm keeping it in.
Yes, I would like it kept. The rest of it sounds okay.
Does it change by adding that in or keeping it in? Does it change the policy at all?
Not really.
Not really, but I don't know why they just took out coronavirus and not measles or something.
And the comment that I had added after Marge's is that fourth paragraph is nearly identical to the third paragraph. So if we include coronavirus in the second paragraph, there really is not a need for the fourth paragraph, and it would be simply included in the third. So that fourth paragraph could be eliminated then.
It looks like it is on this one. They've crossed it out.
Yeah, that was the suggestion of the policy committee, to cross it out. And I'm just saying that it could be crossed out and not change anything, because the third paragraph is nearly identical.
Mm-hmm.
So then the only change would be just adding
Put coronavirus back in
the second paragraph.
Right.
Yeah.
How does everybody else feel?
I'm good with keeping it in.
Ian?
I mean, I don't have an issue with coronavirus being in there, but the shell made it back in there with the following health department recommendations. It's not showing us a change, but it is.
Paragraph. Oh, right above.
Oh, that was always there.
We have to follow state
If
statutes.
you look up our current policy, it's Maine.
In the fourth paragraph? In the fourth paragraph, it's made.
I'm looking right here.
In the fourth paragraph, it's may as how it is now.
But the third paragraph isn't different than what we have now.
Shall is on the third paragraph.
Shall is on the third paragraph, but there is no immunization requirement in school. So it shouldn't be a shall, it should be a may.
If there's no requirement, they're not gonna make it a law.
But there's not a requirement
So-
to be immunized to be in school.
Well, I'm saying if there's no requirement, they're not going to make it a law, so that doesn't change things, you know? But if there is a requirement and it's a state statute, we have to follow it.
I'm fine with the shall in that paragraph. I think the conversation that we're getting confused on is just, we had that discussion about shall may when it was specific to COVID. So in the paragraph that's not struck, I'm fine with shall follow state statutes. I would agree, we have to follow them. I think the issue we had before was in regards to specifically COVID-19, that's where we said we may follow. And if we're striking the entire paragraph, fine. And if we want to leave COVID-19, if that's the consensus of the board, I'm fine with that as well.
So I'm fine leaving COVID-19 in the second paragraph and striking the fourth.
Okay, but we're back to the board shall follow recommendations which pertain to immunization. So if the
Where
St.
is
Croix
that?
County, the
Sherry?
third paragraph, first line, the board shall follow all state statutes, health department regulations, and/or St. Croix County Public Health Department recommendations which pertain to immunization.
I get what you're saying,
Yeah.
because that
And-
third part, the same, it's the first and second, like you're saying, Marge, you have to do statutes, but
Yeah.
that third part is the ding ding there, because it says St. Croix County Public Health recommendations.
Right, and they can't require anyone to get immunized to be able to come to school, like no immunization.
Because that
The
recommendations
state
is the,
statute says, I believe, that you have to have proof of immunization, or the parent has to write a note, and that is the law.
Which I would agree with, so the shall follow that.
Yeah.
Yep, but I think what Sheree is saying here is, when it comes to St. Croix County's recommendations, if they recommend you gotta get vaccinated for something, this would say you have to or you can't be here.
Right, that's my concern, thank you for clarifying.
It's that third part, the recommendations.
And specific to St. Croix County's recommendations,
Right.
not statute.
Right.
It's the shall
So
follow
can we
their
separate
Can we say?
that?
Can we say, in order to protect health and safety of students, district personnel, and community at large, the board shall follow all state statutes and health departments and may follow St. Croix County Public Health Department recommendations?
Well, I think I thought the and/or took care of that.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Oh,
Well,
the
the-
or.
Well,
Well, I think the and/or is just adding that in. Yeah, I would rather have a may follow that recommendation.
Yeah.
I'm good with shall for the states, shall for the health department.
And
And a
may
may
for
for-
St. Croix County.
For a recommend, if it's just a recommendation, I think it should be a may.
Okay, so we need some wording for Alicia, she can't just make it up.
So Alicia, in the third paragraph, keep the board shall follow all state statutes and add in the and health department regulations. And then maybe put period. The board may follow St. Croix County Public Health Department recommendations, which pertain to immunization and other means.
That would do it.
Correct?
Yes.
And add back in coronavirus in the second paragraph.
And in the second paragraph, add back in coronavirus, but continue to strike paragraph 4.
Great.
Okay? Any other questions or further discussion?
I just wanna make sure before you move on that
Okay.
we have this right, so I'm going to.
And I think that's how I kind of worded it, and I put it off to the side.
Oh, that's exactly what you have.
what page is it on the big document?
It's such a big document.
Way down.
Wait.
Page 59.
Oh, it's getting close.
Yep, you had that, Marge. Board will follow all state statutes and may follow.
You doing all right there?
All right, how does that look? Correct?
Are you in the Google Doc?
Yes.
Board may
I
follow,
lost
yes.
it.
Okay, rewind 1 second. So Margin, your recommendation, you said the board shall follow all state statutes and may follow. Do we want may before health department regulations?
I like the way you said it better.
Okay.
than
Yeah, I
you
don't-
said it.
Probably
don't
not,
know
just
that.
doesn't pertain to more than just
Okay,
communicable diseases.
okay.
Yeah.
So then it's, as you have it, Alicia, is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep,
Mhm.
thank you. Okay, then, is there a motion to recommend that we approve the policy updates as presented
With the,
with the change
Changes.
that we made in that Google document? For 8450.
I will make a motion to approve the policies in 5B1 with the inclusion of the revision to policy 8450.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to the recommendation to approve awarding FSMC contract as presented. Shannon, is there any further information that we need with this?
No, there's a memo attached there, so awarding the food service contract to Taher, who we've been working with already. So I know there were some good conversations throughout the RFP process, and sounds like we're ready to continue on our partnership with Taher.
And right now, so with up to 4 1-year, how long will that contract be? Is it 1 year?
It's 1 year, and it can be renewed up to 4 times,
Right.
1 year each.
So that RFP process was, there was other people that you guys, other companies that were looked at and went through?
Minimal response.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm not even sure how many food service companies there are.
There's not many, so I know initially, I believe there were 3 that were showing some interest. Hopefully I'm not saying this incorrectly, Dave, but I think Taher ended up being the only one submitting an actual proposal.
Okay.
So.
I've just seen, as a parent, where Taher started when they first started that contract and where it's gone now, and yeah, I wish there would've been a little more.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make a motion. Do you need a motion on that?
Yep.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve contract, the awarding the contract for FSMC as presented on the agenda.
Is there a second? Sheree seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Looking at consenting agenda, is there a motion to approve the minutes, board bills, personnel update, or sick bank, or any discussion that you'd like to have on any of those items?
I was in for Lori, because Kate was in the minutes all good?
You know what, I didn't get to it. I had a lot of other emails to read, as we all did.
Yes. From what Alicia sent to me, I thought they all looked good.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda 6A, 1, 2, 3, B1, C1, 2, D1 as presented on the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Looking at our next general information, so June 5th will be our work session, June 19th will be the regular session, and that will also include the listening session 30 minutes prior. We'll go for once around the table. Matt, I'll have you start. I have nothing. It was a lot public comment, but I also give every person kudos that felt comfortable to share their thoughts and opinions, and it was nice hearing from both sides, I think, to have that perspective as a board member. Bruce? Sheree?
Hoping that the public comment made tonight doesn't create more chaos within our community. There were side conversations and laughter or snide looks when certain comments were made, and that just is very disappointing for our community to react like that when somebody's speaking their mind and sharing their thoughts. So I would just encourage everybody to be kind on social media, because that behavior shouldn't be tolerated in our school and on social media.
Marge?
I have another celebration that got looked over, I think. I would like to recognize and thank the Stacy Bellil and the post-prom committee and all the parents, teachers, and supporters that helped to make the post-prom event fun and safe for the students. Sounds like the kids really enjoy the event, and I hope that it will be able to be continued, and they can, I just thank everyone that was a part of it.
Good one.
Good. Thanks, Marge. Lori?
I am not aware of anything in our employee handbook regarding the topic of working from home. Could we talk about that at our next work session?
Can you say more?
Well, I don't think we have anything in our employee handbook about working from home. And if that's happening, do we have any policies or guidelines for that? And maybe I'm wrong, maybe it is in the employee handbook and I just overlooked it.
Yeah, I agree, we should have a policy because more and more people are working from home everywhere, so.
Are there people working from home?
I was gonna say, do we have anybody in our school system working from home?
Talking like weather days or something?
Pardon me?
Like weather days, or?
No, I'm not talking about weather days, no.
Okay.
Okay.
That's, yeah, I'm fine putting it on the agenda, I guess.
Well, and I guess if it's on the agenda, knowing if there's any, I mean, I don't really think it's necessary if there's nobody working from home.
I think we have people working from home. I know there are people working from home, which is why I brought it up.
Maybe Shannon needs more information with that one too.
I'm happy to provide whatever
Okay.
information you're seeking.
Okay.
Mhm.
Ian,
Now I'm confused. No, I did go down to Eau Claire last Saturday for the state solo ensemble, and I can tell you that the jazz band killed it.
Well, exemplary.
Uh-huh. They were all of that, and then I went and saw the concert on Saturday too, evening, which was a long day for me anyways. But they were really good there too.
awesome. Cool. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn into closed session of the board with Wisconsin Statute Section 1985 1C to consider the employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of a public employee over which the board has jurisdiction?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? We are now moving into closed session at 8:32.